I'll go first. I'm going to talk about her strengths and weaknesses of the paper. And we thought some strengths were that she had a beginning and ending, and she closed it really well at the end. She established her argument, used complete ideas and details, and she stayed on topic. So those were the strengths. Weaknesses, we didn't think she had enough meat in the paragraphs. There wasn't a whole lot in the beginning, and we wanted more. And a reason for the change. We were confused if it was just to get people talking about her or if it was to honor Rosa Parks. So we wanted more of reasoning in the beginning and then go from there.
As far as the rubrics go, and part of this might be my own individual editorializing, so I will preface with that. We do think it's very clear. Like, there's very little subjectivity within it. It really is like, I mean, you understand what you were looking for with the rubric. It very clearly establishes what's looking for. For me, though, that can be problematic too, because when I look at things like has 3 or more paragraphs, introduction, body, and conclusion, and that's like exemplary, it's like, well, yeah, it has them, but it doesn't mean they're good.
Right.
But that inevitably involves throwing some subjective terms in there, like effective or, well-developed or thoughtful. And then, of course, that involves training amongst evaluators to make sure we're all on the same page for what those terms mean. So I guess that was sort of my struggle.
Those are good comments too. By the way, feel free to rip up these rubrics. They weren't, written by us. They were just chosen as a good place to start these conversations, knowing that ideas, organization, and conventions are things that we like to look at in pieces. And for those people that have had very little experience looking at writing, it's a really good place to start thinking about how to look at writing, which is kind of why we chose those, but certainly are not married to them by any means. Go ahead.
Okay, well, our first conversation was about how none of us were very familiar with the 8th grade level of writing. And so, but we all were pretty consistent with our scoring, which we thought was interesting. We thought that her strengths were that she stayed focused and on topic, and her paragraphs were organized with topic sentences, which were able to anchor all of the ideas. And there was a counter argument present, but we thought that it could have been stronger. She could have had a different example there. As far as weaknesses, we thought she could work on expanding ideas with more details, more specific word choice. But then we were thinking, after learning that it was meant for speech, that it could depend on the audience as well, because we were originally thinking that it was written mainly for the teacher, but if it's targeted towards peers, that the word choice could be a little bit different. And then we thought she could expand the introduction and the conclusion, because they were only 1 or 2 sentences. We noticed that there were some differences as far as the criteria on the rubrics. The one with the numbers was missing word choice, whereas it was included on the one that had words across the top. And I felt that on my scoring that affected a difference on both of those. And we also thought that the one with the words, some of the criteria could have been separated out. So for ideas, that has ideas in it, as well as word choice and purpose and audience. And we think it might give more specific feedback if those were able to be given like 3 separate scores instead of just all one lumped together score. And then we were also talking about, would you give more weight to ideas and content versus conventions, or would you evenly weight?
Thank you. The strengths that we noted are very similar to what's already been mentioned. We felt like she did a very nice job of presenting the thesis, and did a nice job of concluding at the end. She had good supporting details, supporting ideas is maybe a better term, and I will let somebody else talk about what we felt were weaknesses tied to those.
Again, we felt the same way, that it needs more of a very good structure. She can vary her length of sentences, some short, some longer, some complicated, compound. And also, I would love to see her using more precise word choice. flower verbs maybe, or details and the body of her work, and if she can do an alternative, maybe ending, to be more effective.
And with the rubrics, very similar to what you guys were saying, the one with the words, we felt like there was just too much under that. So like they may have a little bit in this one, but a little bit in this one, and so then we had to kind of make a choice of, okay, which way are we gonna go? Where we felt like the side with the numbers was not as much underneath it, like it's just one or two things, so it was much easier to rate using this as opposed to over here. A couple of us were like, well, we could see that going either way because yeah, she has some of this, but not this. So we felt like that one was a little more difficult for us to really pinpoint, where the other one was more detailed.
Thank you very much.
We talked about, as far as the strengths and weaknesses, that this has a really good backbone to it. And then you saying that she just wrote it that night from notes and turned it as a rough draft. I'd be really happy if this is what my students turn it as a rough draft. So the next step is just to go through and talk with her about where she can strengthen the writing in more details, polishing those conventions, richer vocabulary, maybe a little bit of reorganization of some of her topics so they don't skip from one paragraph to the fourth, maybe follow up back to back. But overall, I mean, this would be an exciting student to have because you will be able to see clear growth from rough draft to final piece. These are those kids that you hope to get because you know there's clear, specific places to take them in their writing.
And as far as the rubrics go, the one that has exemplary, proficient, progressing, the thing we liked about that was those bulleted points. Because, for example, on this particular paper, felt like she was in the ideas and content section, felt like she was proficient for the first and third bullets, but the middle one, more in the progressing side. We were talking about more about the word choice. However, saying that, we really like that last column, that 1 point column on the other one, and wish that something similar was on this first one so that you had that final area to go to for those students who just really aren't showing any of these skills that are progressing yet. So that would be kind of our ideal, would be something that had that last column on it.
I don't know what we could say that hasn't already, the rubrics, maybe we'll start with the rubrics because we had good ideas there. We were discussing, we're all different grade levels. We were thinking that the 4 category rubric was something that maybe we were more familiar with as teachers evaluating on kind of a top half, bottom half sort of scale. But we thought that this one would be more user-friendly for younger students. Like you guys even said, people who haven't really talked about writing a lot before. Just because it was kind of general and you can find suggestions there in general terms. But the other side had those super nice specific bullets that as a teacher, if you were using this with your students, it'd be real easy to even circle on that, like these couple things that you could work on. And so we kind of like this idea maybe from a instructional descriptive feedback standpoint.
I think the number one would work well if it's just like a weekly quick write, one draft, there you go, any topic, just general. But then the 3 category one, I think that one would work better for when you are doing those drafts and going back, these are specific things that on your next draft I'm looking for you to work on or to keep the same in order to get in this particular area of the grading.
David kind of mentioned this as well, but we had some difficult distinguishing between 4 and 3, that there wasn't a ton of difference between categories 4 and 3. That, I mean, I knew it wasn't a 4, but as you go through and look at it, you're like, well, it does, like you said, it does have a main idea. It's about I-20 being Rosa Parks, highway. So that was sort of frustrating because you know it's not a 4, but how, if you really just read it, it could be a 4. Ugh, it's not.
Which is sort of that struggle we were talking about. How do we balance between having things that are descriptive enough to truly delineate and give good feedback to kids' writing, and us as teachers live to tell about, okay, I finished that rubric this weekend, which I think is the ongoing challenge. We got these from some training that we did this summer with some people who were brought in to help think about content literacy, and the lady was saying that the one that has the 4 columns across the top is one that the school in Fresno, that it's the final general writing rubric that they came up with, that people crossed content from the technology teacher to the industrial tech to the English teacher, that everybody was comfortable using this rubric, which is why this is my personal editorial, which is why I think the conventions section is so much more to the point and simple than it is on the other side. Because really, if in industrial tech you're asking kids to write, you're focused on, do they understand you want the ideas and organization to be the bulk of what you grade, and what am I willing to support? And in all honesty, as an English teacher, if the content people would just be sure they had capitals and periods, I would love it. I mean, because still as 8th graders, they know, they just don't do it, they get lazy, they don't think it's important, whatever. So this is, might be a place to start thinking about that cross-content, that not everybody, we English teachers get all caught up in our compound complex sentences and what does that mean, and in our possessive and apostrophes, and when you use a gerund and all that English teacher land kind of stuff that really, you know, content teachers had when you were in college but haven't used that stuff all the time. So their school picked something that everybody felt comfortable and confident in grading. So this might be one that either you could use as one that's just, here's the basics of what I'm willing to do, maybe on this quick writes, or even on, I mean, and this is the one they use for whether it's a quick write or an essay or whatever, cross content. And the other one is a different place where the English faculty kind of got together and came up with one that might work. That's more, it is still intended to be used cross content, but is more, it's more an English teacher land than maybe. So that's kind of where they came from, if you want to kind of think about how you might use them. Or modify.
So we've talked about descriptive and evaluative feedback, and then kind of practice descriptive feedback with those pieces along with the rubric. One caveat with that is that there's a place for both, and we're not necessarily preferencing descriptive over evaluative, because there's times when you have to give evaluative feedback to students, and that's helpful too. But we're working on that little descriptive piece today. The next part that we're going to do is with the understanding that if you're going to sit down and read something in school,